Big changes aren't easy on anyone, and it looks like Matthew Arnold is no exception. I mean, the Victorian crisis hit him so hard that he wrote not one, but two texts about it. He was wrestling with what to believe when everything feels like it's falling apart. And as we saw last time, he takes two pretty different approaches. One is a poem that appeals to your emotions, and the other is an essay that appeals to your mind. So, how do we compare these texts clearly without turning our brains into a darkling plain of confused alarms? We block it out, literally. Today's mission is to build a block outline that compares how Arnold uses craft moves in each genre to create themes. We'll also evaluate those differences and similarities using comparative reasoning. Let's see how we can utilize this new essay structure to make a thoughtful comparison. A block structure is a way to organize a comparative essay where each text gets its own paragraph, or block, of analysis before comparing the two. Instead of switching back and forth between texts, you explore one text in your first paragraph, the other text in your second paragraph, and you compare both in the third paragraph. Let's look at how we would create a block outline for the prompt we've been working with. We need to compare how genre affects the way authors use craft moves to create themes, so each paragraph would look something like this. Our first body paragraph will focus on Dover Beach, capturing the craft moves and themes created in that text. The second paragraph will do the same thing, but for culture and anarchy. And the third body paragraph will focus on comparison, how Arnold's use of craft moves and themes are similar to or different from each other. We already created a point-by-point outline where each paragraph focuses on a craft move or theme, but we're using a different structure today. Why would we want to use a block structure for this prompt? Pause and jot down your ideas. Using this structure for our comparative analysis task today is very intentional. Because we're analyzing how one author explores the same theme across two genres, the block structure helps clarify the contrast. The dramatic shift from lyrical emotional craft moves in Dover Beach to formal critique in Culture and Anarchy is easier to track when each is analyzed in its own paragraph. The block structure also gives you room to explore how his craft moves work together before stepping back to compare how the genre affects these craft moves. So let's generate some claims for a block outline. These first two claims won't be comparative since we are just focusing on one text at a time. That means we'll be writing claims that are similar to the kind in a CER response or an essay. For our first claim, we'll focus on Dover Beach, including the craft moves and theme in the poem. I'll zoom in on the extended metaphor of the sea as my craft move because it is so central to the poem's theme that without core values and truths, society is lost to a sense of uncertainty and longing. For my next paragraph on Culture and Anarchy, I might want to focus on the crucial metaphor of sweetness and light that created Arnold's theme, that, in times of uncertainty, society relies on individuals having strong intellects, as well as morals. Using the same craft move sets me up for some thoughtful comparison in my third body paragraph. In each of these paragraphs, I'd find evidence for and explain how the metaphor creates the theme. I could also include how they work with other craft moves, like tone or symbolism, to fully develop the theme. And that brings us to our third claim, which has the hefty task of comparing the two texts. If we've done our job right, the reader now has the background information they need to understand the comparison we make here. We've told them how the author uses craft moves to develop themes in each text, so now we want to explain how they compare to one another. Our prompt mentions the impact of genre on craft moves, so we'll focus on that in our claim. Pause and use our comparative claim criteria to create a claim that compares the way genre affects how the two texts use metaphors to create a theme. This is kind of a hard claim to write, because we have a lot of information to synthesize. It's okay if yours doesn't look just like mine. Just check that your logic follows the same flow. For my claim, I wrote, both Dover Beach and Culture and Anarchy use metaphors to show how society struggles with uncertainty, but Arnold's poem uses the sea to express emotional loss and confusion, while his nonfiction uses sweetness and light to offer a clear, thoughtful solution based on values and learning. I've identified what is being compared, established my basis for comparison, and identified a key difference. So now I have all of my claims for a block outline, and I'm ready to write. Except I'm a bit stuck on this third paragraph. If I've already given the reader all my evidence for both of these ideas, what else do I include? The Department of Reflection is back with How to Write Comparative Reasoning. Our comparative reasoning needs to follow these steps. First, we connect back to the claim. Then we compare the texts to each other. And lastly, we create insight. Let's dive in. My first step is to connect back to the claim. I want to remind the reader that I'm focused on how metaphor works in each genre to show society's struggle with uncertainty. So I'll start by building on that idea. After my claim, I'll add, Arnold uses metaphors in both texts to explore what happens when people no longer feel grounded in shared beliefs or truths. For step 2, I want to compare the texts to each other by directly linking Dover Beach and Culture and Anarchy, not just describing them separately like I did before. I want to show how the difference in genre shapes the effect of each metaphor. Pause your video and identify 3 differences or similarities between how Arnold uses metaphors in these texts. Then add these ideas to your paragraph. Here's what I added. In Dover Beach, the sea metaphor reflects this uncertainty through emotion. It pulls back and disappears, symbolizing the loss of faith and meaning. We feel the sadness and fear of being left without guidance. But in Culture and Anarchy, the metaphor of sweetness and light responds to that same uncertainty with hope. Because it's nonfiction, Arnold can explain more directly that individuals can choose to build their own sense of purpose through morality and intellectual growth. Lastly, I want to create insight for the reader. This is where we go deeper and ask, what does this comparison help us understand about Arnold's ideas, the genre, or his craft? Insight is where you explain what that comparison teaches us about the texts or the author. In my comparison, I zoomed in on how Arnold makes the reader feel in one text versus what he wants us to understand through the other text. So in my insight, I might explain why he chose to express those ideas in 2 different ways, depending on genre. Pause your video and create insight for your paragraph. Consider what the comparison you made helps us understand about Arnold's ideas, the genre he's writing in, or his craft. Use the sentence starters for help if you need it. I might add, by using different metaphors in different genres, Arnold shows 2 sides of the same problem. In his poem, we feel the emotional weight of losing shared values. In his prose, he offers a thoughtful answer. If we focus on becoming morally good and intellectually curious people, we can respond to that loss with clarity instead of fear. So now we know how to block out complicated prompts and reason our way through them. Honestly, it's starting to sound more like conflict resolution than English class. By building a solid block outline and using comparative reasoning, we've explained not just what Matthew Arnold is saying, but why he says it differently in a poem versus an essay. Now that you've got the tools, you're ready to keep going with your lesson materials. See you next time! Hey, hey.